Ooh, it's Halloween. Here's a Halloween story for you. It's called All Hallows Eve. The sun had already set, but there was still a glimmer of gold low in the western sky. The trees, almost leafless now, stirred gently in the low breeze. It was going to be a chilly night. On a bench in the graveyard, facing out towards the valley, a heavily swathed elderly couple sat side by side. They appeared drab, almost colourless in the half light, and tendrils of damp mist were starting to rise around their feet. Charles pulled his scarf up around his ears and settled into his subject. He was about to hold forth on one of his favourite topics, the commercialisation of Halloween. Now Eleanor, his long-suffering wife, had heard it all before, but she leant back and tried to think about something else until it was all over. "Of course, it was TV that caused all this in the first place, you know." He was away. Eleanor rolled her eyes and sighed. There would be no stopping him now. Not for at least 10 minutes. "In the 1950s, no child had ever heard of Halloween, let alone trick or treat. Well, they might have done a bit of apple bobbing, but that was about it. Even in the 60s it wasn't common. But all that trashy American TV has polluted the mind of modern youth. It's filled their heads with rubbish, led them all astray. Do you know, most kids today have no idea what Halloween is all about." "Yes, dear, you've said so before. More than once." "All Hallows Eve. That's what it's supposed to be. All Hallows Eve. That's the night before All Saints' Day. That's what it is. It's not some feeble excuse to wear a fancy dress costume and go around demanding money with menaces from poor old folk and hard-working neighbours." "All right, dear. Don't get yourself worked up. You'll bring on one of your turns if you're not careful." "Well, I'm only saying, it makes my blood boil." "That'll be the day," murmured Eleanor, and she shook her head in disbelief. Every year he was the same. A tub-thumping traditionalist. "It was bad enough this time last year." "It's a special day for some of us. Those of us who take it seriously, that is. And look what happened. We'd got ourselves nicely settled, ready to observe and respect the traditions of the thing, when a great group of kids came trooping through this cemetery. It was as though it was a playground. They were laughing, joking, dressed up as all sorts. There was a clown, Superman, even Mickey Mouse. I mean to say, what's that got to do with it, I ask you?" "Well, yes, dear, perhaps that was missing the point a little." "A little? Completely ruined the whole evening for me. We'd waited all year for our special night. It was a complete waste of time. We didn't get to do any of the things we'd come to do. I was furious." "Yes, I remember, dear. You completely lost your head for a while, and it didn't really help when you tried to frighten them off, did it?" "Huh. Kids these days have got no respect. They just thought, 'Silly old fool, who does he think he is?' And then they laughed in my face, as though it was a huge joke." "Try not to upset yourself. They may not come back this year. Perhaps it was a one-off." "Well, if they do turn up, I'm off. That's me finished. I'll not be bothering with the whole ways anymore." "Now, Charles, never say never." They sat in silence for a while. The wind sighed softly in the skedaddled branches as the last vestiges of daylight sank beneath the horizon. A tawny owl hooted rather theatrically, adding a pleasing cliché to the gloomy scene. "I do love it here, though," said Charles, resettling himself on the bench. He was calmer now, and sounding more like his old self. "There's a wonderful, old-worldy atmosphere about this place." "I agree. It's not everyone's cup of tea, sitting in a graveyard, but yes, I think it's beautiful too." They lapsed once more into a comfortable silence. They had been a couple for so long that they didn't need to speak, each being able to read the other's thoughts. The quarter moon broke through, and without even looking at each other, they entwined fingers, like a couple of lovelorn teenagers. Both felt an enormous sense of peace. How many years have we been doing this? Eleanor mused aloud. I hate to think. Makes me feel old to remember, chuckled Charles. It was completely dark now. The two figures had almost disappeared in the gloom. The greenstone church tower loomed over them, its grotesques and gargoyles keeping guard at each corner. An ancient yew, now black as ink, creaked like a lonely ship at sea. Suddenly there was a noise. What's that? Barked Charles. They both listened intently. The unmistakable sound of children. The laughter was getting closer. Oh no, it isn't. It can't be. Charles was sat up now, trying to see what might be coming their way. His worst fears were confirmed. It is, you know. Same as last year. Look. Approaching the lich gate, at the far end of the graveyard, was a procession of highly gaily clad children, some with lanterns, some with torches. Most had masks or costumes of some sort. One was dressed as a ghostbuster. They were shouting and shrieking and running and pushing and having a wonderful time. They were just being children. Oh, that's it. There's even more of them this year than there was last time. Just look at them all. We'll get no more peace tonight. I expect they've turned it into an annual event, sighed Eleanor. It has rather spoilt it for us. Well, I'm off. I'm not staying here to be insulted, not like I was last year. Charles stood quickly, determined to be away before any of the children could catch sight of him. He swirled his cloak around him in a rather ostentatious manner and adjusted his quaint, old-fashioned hat. Are you coming? He asked. I might just watch them come in and see what they're wearing, answered Eleanor. Well, you're on your own then, snapped Charles with a harumph. And he jutted his chin forward, clicked his heels together, and was gone, disappearing in an instant. Always was impatient, thought Eleanor. She waited until the children had got halfway across the graveyard before standing, very slowly, with her best slack-jawed expression on her face, her eyes round and staring. The children stopped dead in their tracks. She raised one arm and pointed dramatically and let out a low moan, at the same time trying not to laugh. Wow! Cried the Ghostbuster. Did you see that? And as one, the entire group turned and fled in screaming terror. I don't think we'll have any trouble next year, thought Eleanor, as she dissolved into a ribbon of grey smoke, which was sucked back through the crack in the large tombstone which had served as a paving slab under the bench. It wasn't a large crack, but it ran next to the inscription, which read, "And also Eleanor, beloved wife of Charles, who departed this life 31st of October, 1787. Happy Halloween." You can find more Philip Ashmore stories on Amazon. There's a couple of ebooks, one called The Second Wave and one called Small Tall Tales. See you there. Bye bye.